I sat, staring at the first-class ticket to Venice in my hand, wondering if I was making a huge mistake. My mom was once again complaining about everything, from the coffee I had just served to the way I arranged the apartment. "Ella, you never know how to make things look nice," she grumbled, shaking her head. I sighed. Since I was little, I always felt like I had to try to please her. But it never seemed to be enough. "I'm Ella, 29 years old, a marketing director at a large company. Success and financial independence didn't make me feel truly happy. What I wanted was simply to see my mother proud of me, just once. But maybe I was dreaming. She was the woman I always had to compete with for just a little recognition. No matter how skilled or successful I became, she would always say, 'Try harder.' The inevitable had to happen. Every year, on her birthday, I held my breath, waiting for her reaction when I gave her a gift. This year, I wanted to do something different. I decided to take her on a dream vacation to Venice, a place she had always longed to visit. 2 weeks, in a 5-star hotel, strolling along the canals, admiring the famous architecture. I had planned everything carefully. I didn't just want her to be happy, but I also hoped that maybe, just maybe, this could be the opportunity for us to rebuild a relationship that had been lost for so long. I carefully slipped the ticket into my blazer pocket and walked to the living room where she was sitting, eyes glued to her phone. "Mom, I have a gift for you," I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat. She looked up, her cold gaze sending a shiver down my spine. "What now? Another coffee? Or perhaps another useless piece of jewelry?" she said, her tone devoid of any joy. I bit my lip, forcing a smile. "It's not that, Mom. Remember Venice? I've planned a trip for us," I said, pulling out the tickets and holding them up. Her eyes immediately brightened, and she quickly snatched the ticket from my hand. My mom stared at it, then after a moment, said with an unreadable expression, "This must have cost a fortune, didn't it?" I felt a storm of emotions rise within me. She had a way of making everything feel heavy, even when all I wanted was to make her happy. I nodded, struggling to contain my anger. "Yes, Mom, you deserve it," I said. "We're going to have a great time together, I promise." She didn't say anything, just placed the ticket down on the table and went back to her phone, as if nothing special had happened. I felt my words being swallowed by the cold air between us. All I wanted was for her to be proud of me. But it seemed like no effort would ever be enough. She didn't realize that I had put so much thought into this, that I had planned this trip for months, all because I wanted to feel a bit of affection from her. But would I ever get that? Would she ever see me as a daughter, truly deserving of her love and respect? I placed the ticket down on the table, glanced at her one last time, and walked out. Part of me hoped this trip could be an opportunity for us to reconnect, but another part of me felt anxious. Was I just setting myself up for disappointment, hoping for something that might never happen? After my mother left, I sat in the quiet apartment, my heart heavy. But I couldn't always let emotions take over like this. This was the time for a plan. A time that I had carefully prepared for over the past few months. My mom might not realize it, but I knew this trip would be a big challenge. Not just materially, but emotionally as well. This time, I didn't just prepare the trip like I usually did. My mother was someone who always saw problems, always had reasons to criticize everything, whether it was a perfect meal or an expensive gift. I decided that I would create an unforgettable vacation for her, no matter how difficult it might be. First, I booked first-class tickets for us from New York to Venice, not just for the luxury of the flight, but because I wanted to create the most comfortable environment for her. I knew she wouldn't immediately feel the effort I put into this, but I hoped that at least she would enjoy the journey. I carefully selected seats by the window, with the best view, hoping she'd feel the special touch I was trying to provide. The hotel I chose was one of the most luxurious, Belmond Hotel Chiani, one of the most famous hotels in Venice. My mom was not easily impressed, but I knew she would be amazed by the opulence of this place. From the gold-plated bathrooms to the top-tier service, I knew I had created an environment that would make her truly wowed. However, it wasn't just about the luxurious elements. I had also prepared thoroughly for any possible mishap. I couldn't help but think about the potential risks, especially when my mother always had a way of making things complicated, no matter how hard I tried. Every time I prepared something, she would find a reason to make it more difficult. I had asked Isabella, my best friend, to help me prepare a backup plan. She helped me arrange copies of all important documents, from passports, credit cards, to hotel reservations. I knew that if anything went wrong, at least I wouldn't be financially stranded or unable to prove my identity. Isabella also helped me set up an emergency account at a local bank in Venice, just in case something unexpected happened. Though I didn't want to think of worst-case scenarios, I knew my mom's unpredictable nature. She could stir up trouble at any moment, and I had to be ready. When I was sure everything was in place, I turned my focus to preparing myself mentally for the trip. I scheduled activities for the 2 weeks, visiting famous art museums, riding a gondola on the Grand Canal, and savoring the delicious Venetian cuisine. I knew my mom wouldn't appreciate my meticulous planning, but I couldn't help but try to create a perfect trip. I wanted her to enjoy those days, without worrying about work or other issues. However, I couldn't overlook preparing a contingency plan. To deal with my mom, I made sure to leave a copy of all the important documents at home, just in case something went wrong. I also called ahead to the hotel and requested they arrange a separate room for me, a room where I could relax if things became too tense. The feeling of anxiety started to rise. I knew that despite all my preparations, my mom was still an unknown factor. She could cause any kind of trouble, even find ways to ruin this trip if something didn't meet her expectations. But I told myself, this was an opportunity for us to reconnect. I had to believe that everything would be okay. But a small part of me still couldn't shake off the anxiety, always wondering if I had been trying too hard for something that might never happen. With the final preparations in place, I sat at the table, looking at the detailed itinerary for the trip. Part of me felt excited, but I couldn't deny the vague fear gnawing at me. Everything had been carefully prepared, but would I be able to create a beautiful memory for us? That was still something I couldn't be sure of. When my mom left the house, I felt a relief that was hard to describe, but also filled with anxiety. I had hoped, at least once, she would appreciate my efforts. However, as soon as she received the Venice tickets, her expression didn't show the joy I expected. She just stared at the ticket, and then at me with a confused look. Really? Venice? And first class, too? Do you really think I need to sit there for what? I can just take a regular flight? She said, her voice full of criticism. I sighed, knowing she wouldn't be easily pleased with anything I did. Mom, you deserve this. Don't you think so? I tried to say, but inside, I felt a sense of emptiness. She didn't respond, just silently took the ticket in her hand and flipped it over and over, as if it were just a meaningless piece of paper. I didn't know if she'd ever understand what I'd done for this trip. I thought about the weeks I spent planning, searching for flights, hotels, and activities I thought would make her happy. But I received no empathy, only skeptical questions. Throughout the next week, my mom began preparing for the trip, but she never stopped worrying me. Just when I thought everything was ready, another issue would arise. She demanded I go shopping for new clothes for her. Of course, you must know I can't wear just anything when going to Venice, she said when I brought up packing. I've already bought a few things for you, haven't you seen them? I tried to explain. She frowned. That's not good enough. I need outfits that match a 5-star hotel, not those things you bought at that store. She kept criticizing every item I brought, making me feel like a child who didn't know how to take care of her. I spent the whole day shopping for her, my mind spinning, She picked out each outfit and criticized every gift I gave, always with comments that made me feel like my efforts were pointless. She never appreciated what I called care. Instead, there were endless demands and a long list of things she needed. When I brought back the clothes she asked for, she just glanced at them and said, "No, this won't do. I need another outfit, something more suitable for this trip." My mom always had a reason to complain about everything. I began to feel exhausted. After every preparation, I had to run to the stores to buy more things she requested. Though I always tried to please her, my mom never saw those efforts. The trip, which I had hoped would be an opportunity to get closer, only made me feel more distant. As the day to depart neared, I noticed something strange. My mom started to act more irritable and tense than ever. Not only was she complaining about the luggage, but she also started whining about having to arrange everything. "This trip is so complicated, you can't expect me to feel comfortable like this," she said, sitting slumped on the couch, looking at me as if I were the one who had made all the mistakes in her life. The feeling of exhaustion grew stronger inside me. I had prepared everything, done everything I could for her to enjoy this trip, but the criticism kept coming. My mom always made everything harder than it needed to be. Just as Isabella had predicted, I knew this trip wasn't going to be easy. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't let everything just pass by without trying to do something. I didn't want to see my mom continue living in her negative thoughts, never acknowledging the efforts of others. But perhaps the most important thing I needed to do was learn to accept and let go, even if my mom would never understand that. The flight to Venice was confirmed. Everything was ready. But as I arrived at the airport, a feeling of anxiety began to rise within me. I stood among the crowd of passengers, checking my watch, then my phone, but my mom still hadn't shown up. This wasn't unusual, but I felt like something was off. My mom was never the type to easily accept schedules or requests, but she never arrived this late. I tried calling her for half an hour, but all I heard was a long ring, followed by voicemail. I texted her, but still got no response. The tense moments dragged on as I saw the boarding gate close right before my eyes. An overwhelming sense of confusion suddenly hit me. No, she couldn't have left me here. This flight to Venice was supposed to be the start of this trip, the trip I'd put all my hope and preparation into. Now, alone at the airport without her, I didn't know what to do. "Excuse me, the flight is about to depart, you can board now," a gate agent said, holding out my boarding pass. I nodded reflexively, walking forward as my hand remained clutching my phone, hoping my mom would call back. But no, it was just the ring echoing in the silent airport. Although I boarded the plane alone, I couldn't stop thinking about her. We'd planned this trip for so long, yet now I was facing a journey I wasn't mentally prepared for. Was something wrong with my mom? Or was she just finding another way to ruin everything like she usually did? The plane began to take off, and I leaned back in my seat, feeling more anxious than ever. The 8-hour flight seemed endless, but the emptiness inside me didn't ease. My mom, the one I had tried so hard to please all these years, had now left me alone in the very trip I had hoped would be our chance to reconnect. Finally, I arrived in Venice, exhausted and tense. The emerald canals, the tall riverside buildings, everything seemed blurred in my mind. I had just exited the airport when I spotted my mom standing there. A wave of relief washed over me, and for a moment, I thought things might go back to how they were supposed to be. But, as I walked closer, I realized something wasn't right. She stood there, holding a luxury suitcase, her face as cold as ever. "Mom!" I called out, rushing toward her. But she only turned to look at me, a strange expression in her eyes, then casually said, "Your flight was exhausting, wasn't it?" A chill ran down my spine. "Mom, I couldn't get a hold of you on the plane. Why weren't you on time?" I asked, trying to stay calm, my mind beginning to cloud over. She just smiled lightly, a smile that didn't seem to comfort me. "I thought you'd understand. Sometimes adults need a little time for themselves." But when I looked at her face, I knew she was lying. The words didn't match her expression, and the emptiness in her eyes made me feel like something was about to happen. I followed her, still not fully understanding everything that had just occurred. As we reached the airport exit, an unexpected cold feeling rose within me. I checked my purse, where I kept my personal items, and my wallet containing my passport, cash, and credit cards. Oddly, the wallet was no longer there. "What?" I exclaimed, frantically looking around. I started checking my purse again, then searched every corner of my suitcase, but the wallet was nowhere to be found. My eyes began to sting, my heart raced, as if I had lost something incredibly important. "Mom, you took my wallet, didn't you?" I tried to stay calm, asking, unable to believe it myself. She didn't respond, only looked at me with that cold gaze, then turned and walked toward a waiting taxi. "Mom, you can't do this to me!" I shouted, but she didn't even glance back. And as I chased after her, an overwhelming sense of coldness crept into my heart. My mom had taken everything I had, not just my money, but my trust, my hope that she could change. Now I stood there, alone, without money, without my passport, and there was nothing I could do except watch as my mom disappeared into the shadows of Venice. I stood there, watching the taxi disappear into the darkness of Venice, my heart heavy. My mother was gone. Everything I had prepared, all the hopes I had for this trip, to become an opportunity to heal our relationship, had now completely shattered. Not just because of the lack of affection, but because she had acted so ruthlessly. I couldn't let her get away with this. The betrayal was too great. My mother had taken all my money, my passport, my credit cards, and now she had left me alone, stranded in a foreign country. No. I wouldn't let her continue to do this. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. I called Isabella. She was the only friend I trusted right now. We had set up contingency plans for situations like this, but I never thought it would happen so quickly. "Isabella, something's happened," I said as soon as she picked up. "My mom took all my money and my passport, and now I can't get in touch with her. Can you help me?" Isabella wasn't surprised. She knew what my mom would do. "Okay. I'll check the accounts and gather more information. Stay calm. We'll figure this out," she said. Isabella had connections in banking and law, and I knew with her help, I'd have enough evidence to handle the situation. I didn't just sit and wait. I started planning my next steps. First, I had to protect my finances. I immediately called the bank, requesting them to block all my credit cards and bank accounts. It was difficult to hear their refusals, but I insisted they take action immediately. Next, I called the Belmont Hotel Chiani, where I had booked our room for the trip. I asked them to verify the information regarding my mom's check-in and confirm her credit card details. I explained the situation and requested they block all transactions on my credit cards if she tried to use them. They were very cooperative and asked me to send an email confirming the situation. I felt a little relieved as things started to fall into place. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I thought about my plan for retribution. My mom wasn't the type to stop after a small setback. I had to do this carefully, step by step. Part of me wanted to just cut ties with her and leave her to her own devices, but I knew the betrayal was too big for me to stay silent. While waiting for Isabella, I wandered around Venice, trying to calm my nerves. I couldn't believe my mom had acted this way. The woman who had taught me so many lessons, the one I thought I could find comfort from, was the very one who had left me to deal with this alone. But I wasn't the weak girl she could control anymore. This time, I wouldn't let it slide. Isabella called back after she had done everything. "I've contacted the bank and the hotel. We can continue to monitor transactions and prepare legal actions if needed. But you need to reach out to someone who can help in this situation," she said. I nodded, feeling a new sense of strength rise within me. I decided I would confront my mom, that I wouldn't let her continue to destroy my life. I had prepared everything to fight back against what she was doing. As soon as I returned to the hotel, I received an email from Isabella. She had found information about my mom's fraudulent transactions in the past, including illegal transfers from my accounts and opening credit cards in my name. Just as I had suspected, it wasn't just about taking what I had. This was a long-planned series of actions. I looked at the screen, determination filling my heart. My mom would have to face everything she had done. I wouldn't let her get away with these fraudulent acts. I would do whatever it took to make her understand that no one could deceive me again. Retribution wasn't about revenge. It was about asserting myself. Never again allowing myself to be manipulated by her. With careful preparation and the help of trusted friends, I wouldn't let my mom continue to ruin my life. This trip wasn't just a challenge for my mom and me, it was also an opportunity for me to prove that I could stand on my own no matter what she did. The next morning, as I woke up, the feeling of anxiety and tension still hadn't left me. But I wasn't the weak girl anymore. Not the one who was afraid of facing her mother and constantly trying to please her. I had prepared enough, and I knew today would be the deciding day. My mom might think she had won, but I wouldn't let her continue to control my life. Isabella had sent me a copy of my mom's fraudulent transactions, and I had enough evidence to expose everything. But not only that, I had planned to make sure everyone knew the truth. Tonight's gala at Belmont Hotel Chiani would be where my friends and I revealed it all. "We can't let her get away with this anymore, Ella," Isabella said, as we sat together before the event. "We need to do everything very discreetly and be fully prepared. You have all the evidence. Now it's time for her to face what she's done." I nodded, feeling stronger than ever. This trip was not just a dream vacation, it was my opportunity to prove that I had grown stronger, that I could stand firm no matter what she did. This gala would be where I showed everyone my mother's true face. And I didn't feel an ounce of regret. That evening, the atmosphere at Belmont Hotel was luxurious. The glittering lights shone down, and the sweet sounds of a classical orchestra filled the air as guests, the wealthy and powerful, arrived. But I no longer cared about the opulence. My goal was to reveal the truth. We sat near the reception area where my mom was drawing attention with what seemed like trivial stories. But when I looked at her in her bright red dress, my gaze sharpened. She was wearing the things I had bought for her, and it made me more furious. My mom always found a way to take center stage, always wanting to be the focus of everything. But this time, she wouldn't have a chance. Isabella and I had prepared a detailed plan. We had worked with the hotel to track every transaction my mom made during the evening. I had requested them to install cameras in key areas to capture her actions. Every time my mom tried to use my credit card, we would have clear evidence. What she was doing wasn't just a matter of fraud, but a series of deliberate actions, and we wouldn't let her get away. As people enjoyed their meals, I stood up and made my way to the small stage where speeches were being held. The tension inside me only grew. I had prepared a short but powerful speech to expose everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Ella," I began, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Today, I want to talk about someone I've spent my whole life trying to please, yet she has never seen what I've done. My mother. A person who has always used the family name to deceive those around her. She has exploited me, used my trust, and I can't let her continue doing this." As soon as I finished speaking, all eyes were on me and my mom. She stood there, eyes wide open, her face no longer serene but filled with tension and panic. She didn't expect that I had the evidence. She had no idea that I had prepared a perfect plan. I walked toward the large screen on stage and pointed to a clear image of my mom using my credit card to make a purchase in a store in Venice, while I was still at the airport, unable to reach her. She had tried to use the money I earned to satisfy her greed. The entire room gasped. No one thought a mother could do this to her own daughter. This is an image and evidence of my mom using my credit card to pay for luxury items throughout this trip. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. My mom has impersonated me in financial transactions and stolen money from my accounts for years, I said, my voice filled with determination. Guests began whispering, and my mom stood there, frozen. People started exchanging glances, and I could clearly see the shame enveloping her. I had done the right thing. I hadn't let silence control me any longer. The police walked in through the main door. They had been informed and were ready to take action. I turned to look at my mom one last time, seeing her retreat, but not with confidence, but with fear. She knew she couldn't escape this time. "She will face everything she has done, Mom," I said, my hands relaxed, but inside, I felt lighter than ever. Finally, I had regained control, and my mom would have to learn how to face the consequences of her actions. As the police began their proceedings, I felt no regret. I had done the right thing. My mother was arrested, but I couldn't relax. Part of me wanted to scream that finally she was paying for what she had done, but the other part of me only felt emptiness. I didn't feel the excitement or victory I thought I would. Everything just made me feel a deeper pain than ever before. The day of the trial came, and I knew this was when everything would end, at least in the eyes of the law. I was no longer the daughter who longed for my mother's love. Now I was a woman standing up to protect myself, to tell the story of what I had endured for all those years. My mother walked into the courtroom wearing a gray prison uniform, not the elegant dress she always loved. I looked at her, but I didn't feel any sympathy. She used to be someone I hoped would be a symbol of strength and love. But now she was just a fraudster, a greedy person who had deceived not just me, but many others. The police led her up to the stand and her gaze swept over me, but I didn't look back. I knew she was seeking sympathy, but I couldn't give her that. After all, she didn't feel guilty. She still believed that she was the victim, that she only did what she did to survive, to have what she thought she deserved. At that moment, I stood in front of the court, my heart pounding but my hands steady. It was time to say everything my mother had done to me, and I wasn't going to leave out a single detail. "Your Honor," I began, "my mother has always manipulated me since I was a child. She didn't just take what I had, but she also took my trust in people." I began recounting every story I had suffered through over the years. My mother did everything to control my life, from stealing my savings to opening credit cards in my name without my knowledge. But the worst part was when she withdrew money from my accounts to fund her extravagant lifestyle. She took all my savings without asking for my permission. She opened credit cards in my name and left me to shoulder all the debt. Not only did she do this to me, but she also deceived those around her, making them believe in the stories she fabricated, I continued, my hands trembling, but I couldn't stop. She did this out of greed, because she was never satisfied with what she had. I saw my mother sitting silently, not saying a word. Her eyes were glazed, looking down at the floor, and I knew that this was the moment she couldn't deny anymore. I was no longer the little girl she could easily control. I had stood up and protected myself. To me, she's not just a mother, she's a fraud. She's deceived me for years, and now I have to pay for her decisions, but no more. I won't let her continue to ruin my life, I said, my eyes filled with tears, but these were not tears of weakness, but of liberation. The entire courtroom went silent. Every word I spoke hit her like a cold splash of water. What I had just told wasn't just my story. It was a condemnation of her actions. My mother lifted her head, but I didn't see remorse or regret. She just looked at me with a nonchalant gaze, as though I was still the little girl who couldn't leave her grasp. But not this time. This time, I had escaped her control. I had to face the truth, and I stood strong. She no longer had the power to hurt me. I didn't need her forgiveness, and I wouldn't give her another chance. As the trial continued, I heard the words from my mother's defense attorney, but inside, I didn't feel afraid anymore. Everything was crystal clear. My mother had to face the crimes she had committed, and now, I was standing at the center of this battle. "We won't stop here," I told myself as I walked out of the courtroom. "This is just the beginning." My mother was sentenced, 20 years in prison. It sounded so heavy, but I didn't feel joy. Sitting in the courtroom, hearing the judge sentence her, I only felt emptiness. I didn't cry, didn't shout, just a thick silence enveloped me. The sound of the gavel seemed to wake me from my stupor, but in reality I was just facing a reality I had become all too familiar with. My mother sat there, her face devoid of expression. She had been exposed, all her secrets revealed, and now she would have to pay for everything she had done. But I realized something I hadn't considered before. This sentence wasn't just about her being held accountable. It was also a liberation for me, an opportunity to step out from the darkness she had cast over my life for so many years. I had once thought I needed her approval, that my life wouldn't be happy if she couldn't see my efforts. But now, seeing her being sentenced, I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. Because at last, I understood that freedom doesn't come from being accepted by someone who never accepts you. Freedom comes from standing up and deciding your own life. When the trial ended, I walked out of the courthouse with a completely different mindset. I was no longer the poor girl always trying to please someone who would never be pleased. I was no longer the person who thought her mother's love was essential to living a happy life. I could build my own life without her acceptance. The next day, I didn't go back to the old apartment my mom had once shared with me. I decided to go somewhere else, a place where I could start fresh, without the shadows of the past following me. I rented a small apartment in the city center, close to my office, where I could feel like myself. A space where there was no control, no criticisms, and no forced relationships. The new life wasn't easy, but I felt a freedom I had never known before. I no longer had to live in the obsession of phone calls from my mom, her unreasonable demands. I no longer had to keep a heart full of wounds to please anyone. I finally realized that I needed to live for myself, not for the unrealistic expectations from my mom. Every morning I looked in the mirror and asked myself, who do I want to be? The answer was simple. I wanted to be myself, not the person my mom wanted me to be. I wanted to build a life of my own, free and independent, without depending on anyone to feel complete. As time passed, I started feeling happy. My career was progressing, I had healthy and trustworthy relationships. Every time I felt uncertain or worried about the past, I reminded myself that I had shed all of that, and I was no longer bound by people who didn't understand me. What I had now was freedom, a life not shackled by the unreasonable standards of my mom. I no longer waited for an apology from her, because I had freed myself from those obsessions. I had learned the biggest lesson from my mother. Sometimes, strength isn't about pleasing others, it's about standing up for yourself and not letting anyone control your life. Finally, I no longer looked at my mom with anger or disappointment. I only looked ahead, where I was building a new life for myself. A life no longer shadowed by her criticisms or manipulations. I understood that, in this life, freedom is the greatest gift. And I had found it. My mother might be imprisoned, but I had been set free. My life is now mine, and I will never let anyone, whether it's my mother or anyone else, take that freedom away from me again. Everything seemed like it had come to an end, but no, my life began again with stronger steps than ever before. My mother was convicted and had to take responsibility for her fraudulent actions. But I didn't stop there. I couldn't let everything I had gone through be in vain. I wanted to do something for people like me, those who had been manipulated, deceived, and hurt. With the help of Isabella, the only friend who had always stood by my side, I decided to create an organization to support victims of financial fraud, just like what I had endured. We called it The Deceived. This organization not only helped with legal matters, but also provided psychological counseling for those deceived in family relationships, work, and other circumstances. Isabella worked tirelessly to build the foundation of the organization. She reached out to lawyers, financial and psychological experts, and established relationships with law enforcement agencies to ensure that the deceived would help people quickly and effectively. As for me, I started talking to those who had been deceived by my mother. Victims I knew, people who had been exploited just like I had. They needed a place to tell their stories, and I would be the one to listen. One of the first meetings was with Mrs. Williams, who had been swindled by my mother in an investment scam. She had lost all her life savings, just because my mother convinced her to invest in a high-interest project. She sat in front of me, holding a cup of tea, her tired eyes full of hope. "Ella," she said, her voice choking, "if it weren't for you, I don't know where I'd be. Thank you for giving me the chance to tell the truth." Mrs. Williams' words hit my heart hard. It was true, I couldn't just stop after facing my mom. I needed to help those who had been robbed of their trust, their assets, and their lives. Together with a group of volunteers from the organization, we held support meetings for victims, ranging from those affected by financial fraud, those manipulated in personal relationships, to those exploited in their work. I worked tirelessly to ensure these people no longer felt isolated. Our organization provided not only legal assistance, but also a community where they could find support and encouragement. Every time I saw the smile of a victim after receiving our help, I felt like I had done the right thing. I hadn't just saved my own life, but I was helping others escape the shadows of deceit. I didn't want anyone to go through what I had endured. A year later, our organization held a fundraising event at a large hotel in New York, and what was special about that event was that it attracted many people, including those who had been deceived by my mother. That evening, I stood on stage, looking at the faces of the people we had supported, and those we were still helping, and I realized something important. I was no longer the weak, fearful girl trying to please my mom. I had stood firm, rebuilt my life, and now I was helping others do the same. "We haven't just created an organization," I said in my speech. "We are building a community, a strong community, where victims are no longer deceived and manipulated, but are winners in life." My words echoed in the air, and I could feel the warmth from the people around me. Everything had changed, and I understood that I had found my new purpose in life. It wasn't to seek my mother's approval, but to do something meaningful, to help those who had been hurt, just like I was. And then, when I saw the new victims of the organization walk in, their eyes full of hope, I knew I had done the right thing. This organization wasn't just a place to rescue broken lives. It was where we proved that, sometimes, healing comes from facing the truth and walking alone. It was only after my mom was convicted and everything came to light that I truly felt relieved. Not because my mom had to face the consequences, but because I had found my own strength. And now, I could live my life, free and unbound by her negative actions. Ella's story is a journey from pain and loss to self-liberation and rebuilding her life. After years of living under her mother's control and manipulation, Ella stood up not only to protect herself, but also to help other victims of fraud and deceit. By creating a support organization, she not only healed the wounds of her past but also inspired many others to reclaim their freedom and the strength to take control of their lives. What do you think about Ella's journey? Could you stand up like she did if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel to never miss out on more touching and meaningful family stories.